host of Strange Oddities Podcast, Matthew.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Strange Oddities Podcast. How's everybody doing? I hope everybody's doing well, staying safe during these hard times. It's a crazy world, and I don't know, I hope you guys are all safe and all okay. I know I am. I hope my eye doesn't look too bad. I had a little thing this week with a little infection in my eye I had to take care of. But okay, I can do the show with one eye. I think I'll be okay with doing the show with one eye. I'm gonna go ahead and just act as if my eye is okay. That's all right. Anyway, guys, welcome to Strange Oddities Podcast. I'm excited for tonight's show. We have a great topic for tonight, along with a great guest. I'm excited to have her on board for tonight's episode number 10. Before I give her a nice warm introduction, guys, if you'd like to follow us, please follow us on Facebook. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel on YouTube. It's not much. There is a live chat. You can comment whenever you see the live video stream on YouTube. There's a little bell at the top right corner of our YouTube channel, and it's just hit it, and you're subscribed to the channel. That's how you can follow us on YouTube. Guys, in order to get a list and news and announcements of upcoming guests on Strange Oddities Podcast, you can follow us on Facebook. All the news is shared on my Facebook page, Strange Oddities Podcast. Not hard to look up. We do have a website, guys. It's strangeodditiespodcast.wordpress.com. Pretty easy. If you would like to give us feedback about the show, good constructive criticism about the topics, the guests, the host, we do take all kinds of good criticism. Please email us, strangeodditiespodcast@gmail.com. All hate mail goes to me. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce a very nice, lovely lady. She's a great guest for tonight. If anybody's heard of the Fox Sisters, who's a big influence over modern-day spiritualism, there's a story about them. 3 young girls. They lived in a small cottage in Hydesville, New York, back in the 1840s, and they experienced some paranormal stuff in their home. And they thought they were communicating with a spirit, with knocks, rappings, and all kinds of noises in the house. They thought would communicate back with them through strange noises and knocks. The family, the Foxes, thought they had medium abilities, so they thought they would kind of tour them all over the country and all over the world. They became famous, famous mediums, and they went on big stage seances, and they were big attractions, and until one day one of the sisters stepped forward and unfortunately claimed that they all hoaxed it. However, there's a big question: did they hoax things or didn't they hoax things? Because there was a skeleton that was found, skeletal remains that were found in the cottage basement one day in 1904. There was a box that fell out of the wall. There was some children playing around and accidentally discovered a box that they bumped into that fell out from the wall, and there were bones. And there's a lot of claims that it was a supposed dead peddler that visited the cottage long before the Foxes lived there. And there's a lot of speculation that there was a murder of the peddler when the Bells lived there. We're not sure who did it. There was, a lot of, again, allegations and speculation, and, of course, this is going back to, the 1800s. So they did things differently back then. So I hope you all enjoyed my little synopsis of the Fox Sisters. I mean, there's a lot to go over as far as the Fox Sisters. Miss Tracy Murphy, I'd like to welcome her to the show on the Strange Oddities Podcast. She's the current Deputy Director of Historic Palmyra, and she's also the caretaker of the Fox Sisters ruins that is trying to be preserved by the state, and herself and a bunch of others that support the Fox Sisters property, and they do such a great job up there. I commend you guys for taking care of it. And Tracy, welcome to the Strange Oddities Podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Matt.
That
This is a treat.
yeah, that was a nice long intro.
Well, it's not a short story.
Yeah, no, it's not. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of research, and myself and colleagues of mine, we're doing a documentary, which we hope to finish at some point. We all know when you do a documentary on your own, it's a lot of hard work. We're trying to do it the right way. We're trying to do it the right way by everybody as well. We're trying to do it with much respect and treat everybody with respect in the documentary and all the locations that we work with, and everybody's been so wonderful and so supportive, and we all appreciate that. And but all the research that we've done and all the discussions that we've had personally, I was just like so fascinated by the Fox sisters and how much of the Fox sisters that people don't know about. Like there's just
Right.
there's the mainstream stuff. Everybody just think automatically because this big parapsychologist that investigated them, so automatically they think because of this famous, well-known parapsychologist investigating them that they must have just automatically faked things. But there's a lot more to it than just that. Tracy, before we get into all that, because there's a lot to go over tonight. Um, Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, how you got started, and we'll just take it from there.
Okay. Well, you already said my name is Tracy Murphy. I am the caretaker and the historian for the Fox property and the Fox sisters here in Newark, also known as Hydesville, New York. Hydesville, sadly, is just a road, not a hamlet anymore, but I still refer to it as Hydesville.
And it's also a
I've
6 hour
lived,
drive from where we are.
yes, it
Sorry,
is.
had to throw
It's
that in there.
amazing the length people will come.
Yeah.
Yes. But I've lived here all of my life. When I was younger, my girlfriend and I would come to the property. And this goes back to when the original caretaker, John Drummond, was there, and he had built a replica of the cottage from the 1800s, and he lived in the cottage there on the property. And we knew who he was. And when he passed, the house just kind of sat there empty, and we would still go and go to the property. We weren't really quite sure why we were always drawn to it, but we were. Um, and then one day, the land was purchased or taken back by the National Association of Spiritualist Churches, the NSAC. Their headquarters are in Lilydale. And there was a wonderful woman by the name of Reverend Cozy Allen who approached my husband, and she asked him if she knew anybody that would be interested in helping out at the property. They were going to need someone to mow and take care of it, and he said, "Oh boy, do I know the person for you." So it was me.
And now we're stuck.
1998.
And now we're stuck with you.
And now you're stuck with, yeah,
Yeah.
I've got my burial plot all planned out.
Yeah, but again, like what I love about everybody that you work with and everyone around you, like that I've been introduced to and that I've worked with so far, they're so supportive of the situation of the Fox sisters.
Mhm.
They kind of try to look at the story with a more positive light than the negative side of it. There's a lot of negative side of it, but a lot of negative things with their backstory that people don't know about too.
Right.
And I think one of those things that we're gonna dive into the possibility of them hoaxing or not hoaxing things. I kind of talked to Tracy about that a little bit. If we can dive into the possibility of them not hoaxing, their abilities or their paranormal activity that they were experiencing in the cottage, because let's face it, they allegedly found skeletal remains.
Hmm.
There's a lot of speculation about the bones and stuff, but
Sure.
like for me personally, if there were skeletal remains and there is proof that something happened to somebody, like to me, if those were there all along, way before the Fox sisters lived there, that could be a little credence to the story of having actual activity in the cottage.
Absolutely, yes. There are a lot of different, I like to think of the story as it's kind of like a tree because there's many branches to the trunk and the root of the story. And I think usually when I go into my talks to historians or wherever I'm going to talk about them, the first thing I always say is, "Tell me what you know about the Fox sisters." And the first thing they say is, "Oh, they faked it."
Right.
Okay. And I include that in my story. It's part of the story. It's
Right.
part of, the whole dynamic of what happened in the cottage, after the cottage, and throughout most of their lives. I mean, they didn't have easy lives because of their talents.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they started off like really young. Their family pushed them as young girls, and I can't imagine with the age of the young girls. I think they were what, like between 12 and 14, or like 13 and
Hmm.
14. They were like
Yep.
really young, and to go be pushed in front of the almost the entire world at that age,
Yeah.
claiming, a really big thing that they have these gifts, and you're in front of millions of people who are big believers in spiritualism, because it was,
Hmm.
a big movement during that time period. So you can't
Yep.
imagine the pressure that these young girls had under their family.
Right. And no choice,
Right, and no
because
choice. Right,
back in the 1800s, women were just starting to get a voice, and there were a lot of things going on in 1848.
right,
If you were a young girl, you were generally married by the time you were 16 and had a family by the time you were 18, and a home to take care of and a husband and children. Education was a luxury. And the Fox family, they came from very humble beginnings. They didn't have a lot of money. They were devout Methodists. I mean, they never said, "Hey, we're spiritualists." That only came because of the communication with the spirit when they were in the house.
right,
So, they didn't have much of a choice. And kind of on the flip side also, I don't think that spirit gave them a choice either. It was basically, "You need to give out our messages, we're not going to leave you alone." So it was either go crazy or here's your message.
right, right. So, and the other thing that we researched for our documentary that we came across, through your background and your knowledge about the land itself. Now, there's a lot of history that people don't know about that surrounds the cottage and the area where they live. There was like a lot of Indian kind of stuff going on there too, and other spiritual things as far as the area itself. I think also could have been potentially adding to their experiences when they lived in the cottage as well, other than the rumors of the dead peddler.
Hmm. Right. And we are, where Hydesville or Newark is located, is we're in Wayne County. And in the 1800s, Wayne County was known as the burned over district.
Right,
And it was because we had a lot of religions that were popping up, and you would have, ministers and pastors and whatnots coming in from all over, and just throwing up these revival tents and doing their sermons, and then they would move on to the next town. And people kind of got burned out. But also, we're only maybe, I think, 10-12 miles from Palmyra, which was the Mormons.
right,
Hill Cumorah is in Palmyra, and that was a big religion that started up. We had Shakers and Quakers. Some people like to laugh and say Shakers, Quakers, and moneymakers.
right.
But they were the snake oil salesmen, and it. So spiritualism just kind of fit right in
Sure.
with what was going on, and I think it was kind of a need.
Yeah.
In Hydesville, they had a nice little Methodist church.
Right.
Um, and churches were a big part of your community. That was the law. You followed the church.
Right. Right.
So,
Um.
yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that just reading my messages here. Big shout out to people, just real quick, Tracy. We do have a lot of people in the chat. Guys, thanks for joining and tuning in to tonight's show. We have Brad M. Is in the chat room. He's following the show and listening tonight. Brad, thanks for tuning in. Gagnon Paranormal, guys. That's Ron and Lourdes, as we all know, good friends of ours. Guys, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in. And my wife is always in the moderating the chat group as well for us. She's a big help for me behind the scenes. Thank you, my lovely, beautiful wife. Love you. And real quick too, you mentioned historic Palmyra. I want to give a big shout out to Bonnie Hayes, who's a really great person that I met at the time that we were doing our work for our documentary. I knew her a long time ago before that through mutual friends and other contacts and events that we've come across before. But she had given us the invitation to come visit Palmyra. We took that opportunity, and it was a great opportunity because we had such a great experience there. And, I just want to give a shout out to her that we had such a great time. And if you haven't visited Palmyra, it's a great location. There's a lot of activity in different buildings there. It's very affordable for people to kind of rent out for the night. It's not unreasonable at all, and Tracy helps out with the paranormal investigations there, as well as Bonnie. She's a big part of that too. Just real quick, wanted to kind of throw that out there. I know you guys are very much involved in the paranormal scene up that way.
Yeah, we have some great locations.
Yeah, you sure do.
We'll do an October show. Sybil Phelps's birthday is in October, so we should do an October show, maybe
Right.
live from the Phelps.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, we came away with some great evidence from there. We had a picture that Gerard Simonelli took when he was with us. We had this picture of a shadow that we just couldn't figure out where that shadow came from, and it was such a great catch. He didn't even know he had it. Somebody else had to point it out to him and said, "Did you know you had this in your photo?" And we're like, "No." And then we were playing with the little girl in one of the buildings where she likes to hide under a chair or around this burner.
Holly, yeah.
Yeah. We were playing with her with the ball, and the ball was apparently moving by itself. And Gerard was pushing the ball back and forth with her, trying to communicate with her that way. And Ron, who's in the chat group, had a great spirit box session with the little girl, and actually said her name so clear on the spirit box. It just like blew us away. We were like, "Holy cow!"
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. I'm sure they miss us dearly.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
We're hanging in there.
I was just recently on another radio show. Another shout out to my Supernatural Realm Radio, Chip Reichenthal and Tim Roxbury, who are good colleagues of mine. Chip's a good friend, brother, and mentor of mine in radio. We were just talking about that. We said, isn't it kind of funny how we haven't been investigating anything for months? How would the spirits and the ghosts feel of not being able to communicate with the living for a while? How are they feeling about
probably
that?
A nice vacation.
They're
probably like, oh, thank God, it's getting a break.
Yeah, where's this idiot Matt with the flashlight? Used to ask me stupid, boring questions every night.
I'm sure Sybil is sitting there thinking, oh, good.
Yeah.
This is nice. I like this quarantine stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, but
yeah.
Good times. Yeah, I totally have ghost hunting withdrawals badly.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people do.
Yeah.
A lot of people. Yeah.
Right. So back to the Fox sisters. Real quick, Tracy, if you don't mind. What I'd like to kind of dwell into a little bit is one of the stories that really intrigues me that a lot of people don't know about is the story of Kate, supposedly getting married to this famous, if I have the right sister, getting married to a famous archaeologist that was well known across the world. And I think there's a lot of that story where I feel that family could have had a big influence on them, maybe stepping forward saying, we hoaxed this. Maybe they didn't want to interfere with their marriage or their relationship, or they had a big influence over, what happened with their relationship.
Right. It was Maggie.
Maggie, okay.
Also, yep, her full name was Margaretta. but they called her Maggie. And a lot of people get her confused. They call her Margaret, which was her mother's name. But for all intents and purposes, I always call her Maggie because it's a lot easier. But yes, Maggie was very young. She was about 16 or 17 when she met Elijah Kent Kane. He was a famous Arctic explorer, and he had lost his brother at a very young age. So he thought that he would just entertain the fact of, oh, here's this young girl who says she can talk to spirits. And so he actually came in for uh, a message or a circle or a seance, however you want to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was with Maggie. And he fell madly in love with her, and she felt the same. It was a relationship that was, I think, stressed at most times. He was Catholic, his family was Catholic, and they had a lot of money. He was very well educated, and she was not. She didn't have a lot of money. She was doing something that, the family kind of looked on as wrong. Um, and a lot of people, it just depended where you were at that time if you believed in this spirit communication. um, he wanted to marry her, and his parents absolutely were mortified. They said no. He tried to have her educated. He paid for her to go to school and be educated. He asked her if she would become Catholic and convert, and she said yes. And this was all just so she could be with him. Um, he was due to go on a 3-year Arctic exploration. And before he went, he asked her if she would marry him, and she said yes. It was a quiet, you know, somewhat secretive wedding. Her family was involved, his was not. And when he left for the exploration, he told Maggie's mother, Mrs. Fox, that when he came home, he was going to put an advertisement in the newspaper that would let the entire world know that Maggie was his wife and that they had been married. And she was quite happy with that. They wrote letters back and forth while he was gone. Um, Unfortunately, he was on the last leg of his trip when he contracted malaria,
Mm.
and they had to go to Havana, cut the trip short. He
Did
never
he
made
become
it back.
did he become a zombie because he had malaria? Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Gosh, I think that might be another story. Yeah, unfortunately for Maggie, though, that was life altering for her.
Yeah.
It wasn't like someone came to her and said, "Oh, I have some bad news." She read it on the front page of the newspaper,
Mm.
and the headline said, "Dr. Kane dies in Havana." Um, I think from that moment, her life just started to spiral out of control. He left her a small amount of money. The family gave her a little bit, but they refused to recognize her relationship with him, even the fact that they had been married. And she wasn't even invited to the funeral, which
Oh,
was a huge ordeal.
sure.
There were large parades and
Heartbreaking.
progressions. Yeah, absolutely. And when the money ran out, she, sent them letters and asking for her portion of the money, and they just refused. And so she had some influential friends living in New York City, and they told her, tell him you're going to publish your love letters. You've got all
Right.
these letters. He wrote you, and you wrote him, and the relationship is obvious. So play your cards.
Yeah.
And she did, and they did send her some more money with a promise of more, and it just never happened. So
Right.
she used her hand and published her love letters. and the family just, they didn't care. They didn't care.
Right.
And I think it was probably around that time that, she started, just the downward spiral happened from there. So,
Right. Well,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, heartbreaking. And then there were other rumors around that time, I think, where the public learned that they were kind of poor and they were hurting for money, and they possibly took money to come forward and say that they were faking things, or that they were frauds. And then the other thing I want to point out too, I don't remember the title of the recent TV series that was out on cable, on a big network. If anybody can remember the TV series or the name of it, you might even know it. But there was an expedition of these ships where they needed a rescue, and Kane, I believe, the archaeologist, was a part of the big expedition to rescue these men that were stuck on a ship somewhere where it was like really freezing cold, and all these like weird phenomena things started happening surrounding the ship where they were stuck. But he was supposed to be, or was, part of that expedition.
Yeah.
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 So
He
that.
he was very real, just, as real as the Fox sisters. And
Yeah.
uh, I think that's one of the things that I've always wanted to do with the Fox sisters is make people realize that they were real people. They were just ordinary real people. They had problems just like the rest of us.
They
And
were extra. They
they
were extraordinary.
yes, they were.
Yeah.
Yes. I believe they were chosen for the gifts that they had. And, they could have chose to go crazy from that and not do it and turn the other way. But, they took the assignment that they were given and they went forward. Kate did a little better than Maggie. I think Maggie really, out of the two girls, Maggie had more of an education because she was older and had been going to school. Um, but when you're sitting in a hotel room and your sister, your older sister, who's 20 plus years older than you, is your manager and saying, this is the next person for your reading, this is the next person, you don't get a choice. And they didn't become rich off of, these seances and circles. They lived in a rented hotel room in New York City. They never really owned a house or property. It wasn't like they were these millionaires that had no problems. I mean,
Yeah.
they definitely had their issues.
Yeah. Before, you had mentioned the love letters and her publishing the love letter, and I'm glad you kind of brought that up because, upon our research during the documentary, where we were at the Newark Arcadia Museum, and I find this experience that me and Anthony had really, really intriguing and entertaining because as we were digging for more research and we're going through scrolling through all these books on the shelf that were connected with the Fox sisters, we were looking for like detailed, information that we could throw with our documentary. And as I'm looking at this book kind of like pops out and stares at us in the face. And I don't remember if it fell off the shelf or something to that effect. But Anthony grabs the book. He's like, "What? This book?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that book." I said, "There's something about this book that intrigues me." I said, "Pull it off the shelf." And we look at it, and it was one of the books that we're talking about her published love letters with Kane. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, what are the odds of that happening while we're doing our research and we're looking for detailed information? And I think it was like
Right,
her way of saying, "Hello, it's right here, it's on the shelf."
right.
Like, she's basically throwing herself at us, saying like, "Here it is."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Maggie's story is a story all in itself.
Yeah,
One of these days I'm gonna divide them up and say, okay, here's the story of just the Fox family. Here's the story of Maggie and her life, and here's the story of Kate and her life. And they were very interesting young women that just, they were just kind of thrown into this situation and tried to do the best they could. And who's to say that in some strange way, we wouldn't do the same thing. I mean, people do strange things all the time for money. And it was Maggie who, a reporter approached her in 1888, 98, and said, hey, you're one of those famous Fox sisters, and if if you if you need some money, I'll give you $1,500, but you got to go on stage and you got to tell everybody that you and your sister faked this whole thing.
Right. Right.
And I'm sure she didn't jump up and say, "Oh yeah, yeah, right away, right away."
Hmm.
She probably thought about it and had to weigh the pros and cons, and eventually, yeah, she did. She
Yeah.
she got on stage and she said, "We we we did it. We hoaxed everybody, and we were dropping apples, and we wanted to scare our mom, and it just kind of took on a life of its own. And my sister became our manager and pushed us into it. But there's facts that you can't dispute."
Yeah. Yeah. I want to give another shout out to a person that just appeared in the chat group. Mr. David Murphy is in the chat group. I want to say hello to him. How you doing, David? Thanks for tuning in, listening, and supporting Miss Tracy Murphy tonight. Yeah. But everybody's coming out tonight. That's great. Thank you all for your support tonight. Really appreciate it. Guys, if you have a question for either myself or Miss Tracy Murphy, one of us would be glad to try to answer them as best we can. All right. So here's a really good question, Tracy. Another thing that we can get into real quick is, how do you think I mean, obviously, again, like you said, each of them have their own story. A lot of them have really fascinating things surrounding each of them. But what is one of the most things that really influenced modern day spiritualism? Why is it that modern day spiritualism, especially Lilydale, why is it that they worship the foxes so much?
I think, and everybody always asks me what was so special about them, that why Hydesville, why them, why that time. um I don't know. I don't have the answers to that. I just know that they were two young girls. They were very humble, came from very humble beginnings. They had ordinary parents. They had ordinary siblings, or so we all thought. They came from a large family. They were the youngest of seven, really, siblings.
Right.
And the four oldest siblings were much older. Their younger brother, who was the last of the first four, was 20 years older than them.
Hmm.
I think they were just at the right place at the right time. And I
Yeah.
think that they were able to look at the situation differently, whereas the other families, they would hear these strange noises and strange things would happen in the house, and they were terrified and they left.
Right.
um, you know this family showed up, and at first it was kind of funny, and then they noticed a pattern, and then they could kind of repeat what they were hearing until that night, when they just basically said, "All right, we're invested, let's do this."
Hmm.
And next thing you know, they're speaking to spirits.
Yeah.
Not just them, their mother, the neighbors,
Hmm.
their brother was able to do it. And it followed them. It wasn't just at the Fox location in Hydesville.
Right.
When, they decided to separate the girls, Maggie went and stayed with David, who lived 2 miles up the road from the cottage, and Kate went with Lee in Rochester.
Right.
The spirits separated and followed them. And then when they were back together, it was stronger and it was more pronounced. Um, as far as,
England. As far as England.
yes, absolutely.
Yep.
And lucky for Kate that she was able to find, a spiritualist church in England,
Right.
that welcomed her,
Hmm.
because spiritualism really wasn't a new thing in 1848.
Right.
We call it modern spiritualism
Right.
because it was here in America and it was a little different. And I kind of, I never say this the right way, but I think that spiritualism, modern spiritualism, personally, I believe it's the only religion that does not rely on blind faith. Most religions, you just take it because somebody says so. When you're involved with spiritualism, if you're lucky and you're a medium, you can see, hear, taste, smell spirit. If you're lucky, you get to communicate with them. People see spirits. It's to me, the only religion that you don't have to rely on that blind faith. And I don't knock any of the religions out there. I think religion is the most interesting thing out there. Everybody has a different opinion about it. It's just like politics,
Oh,
religion
sure.
and politics,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So, for me, I love having healthy conversations with people who don't want to argue their point, or at least present their point in a constructive way.
Yeah.
I'll sit and talk about it all day. Now, my opinion is that, okay, so Maggie said, yeah, we tricked everybody, haha. But then as soon as she said it, she wanted to take it back. It wasn't the right thing for her. But at the time, when you need money, you do desperate things.
Sure.
And the only thing that I can come back with is, that saved them after they were both gone. They had both passed the spirit. 1904, kids were playing in the old spook house.
Right.
And guess what? They fell into the wall. The peddler and the tin pack came out from behind the wall, and there he was.
Yeah.
They couldn't have known that.
Right.
They knew he was buried in the basement. They just couldn't find him until that day. I think when the universe is ready, it's ready.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree with you 100%. Want to just give another shout out to the chat group. DJ joined us tonight. DJ, what's up? How you doing? Hope you're doing well where you are, and thanks for tuning in. Brad M just says that the raps occurred wherever they traveled, wherever they went. And Mr. Murphy said, thank you for, I guess, what I said earlier. Yeah. Guys, again, if you have any questions for me or my lovely guest tonight, Miss Tracy Murphy, we're talking about the Fox sisters. If you joined us late, we've really covered a whole lot already, different stories involving each of them. We brought up the archaeologist that married Maggie, and her heartbreak and her tragic situation with her husband, and the backstory about how they got together, and the published letters we brought up. It was Leah who came and stepped forward that said that they had hoaxed it, correct? If I have the correct one.
It was Maggie.
Maggie, okay, I was wrong.
Yep.
I researched it. I researched them so much I can't retain which one did which.
Don't feel bad.
Yeah.
I can say it in my sleep, and I'm
Right.
and I don't know everything. Sometimes I feel like a family member.
Yeah.
I must somehow, I've got to be related to these guys. But when you live in Newark, for a long time we were, people, they didn't pay attention to the Fox property. It was all overgrown. Nobody knew what was out there. And if they did know what was out there, they didn't care. It
Right.
wasn't something that Newark, I think, was particularly proud of.
Mm-hmm.
And, I came out and very quietly did my job. And, I would go out there and I would mow and I wouldn't say too much. And then I don't know what it was, but one day I just said, you know what? The world's going to know who these two women were. And it was my goal to put them in the front again, make people realize, listen, they did a great thing.
Right.
You can't, there's just some facts you can't dispute. And most people want to stop right at, well, they tricked everybody and, they were terrible, whatever. But there's more to the story. And that's always what I try to get across, is there was more to the story.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. I just really quick want to just say to like the Journey Within Church, the North Church, everybody that's been supportive, Lilydale, of the Fox
Mhm.
sisters and the property. I think if it wasn't for, and yourself also, including your husband and all the hard work that, everybody puts in to preserve the history and the ruins, because like if you go there and you see all the work that these people put in to preserve not only the property but the story, like to put them in a more positive light, because that's what you guys have done. You've turned something into a negative situation, that had a negative thing on spiritualism, and you guys have kind of turned it around into a more positive situation.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it's, I think every story like this, it is very difficult to find true historical facts. You really have to do your homework. You have to read the old newspapers, and you have to, read a book, even though you might not like what it has to say. But there are some books out there that I've read maybe a chapter or two, and I put them down, and I'm like, there's no way, I just can't do it.
Right.
The first time I ever looked on Wikipedia, I don't know what I was thinking. It was probably like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I typed in the Fox sisters. It was horrible. I was almost in tears, and I realized that I have to choose my battle,
Yeah, yeah.
and I have to be careful because I don't want to offend anybody, but then
Sure.
again, I don't want anybody to offend them.
Right.
I I get really protective, but the 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 NSAC has done a great job. The property right now looks amazing.
Oh, it
They
does.
just did a whole new pathway. You wouldn't even recognize it.
Right.
There's a new pathway that goes all the way out. There's a nice round circle. They have a nice little pathway that goes to Mr. Drummond and his wife where they're buried.
Nice.
There's more bricks that are around the enclosure.
Which looks great,
Um,
by the
it,
way.
it, Thank you. It's a great place. And,
Yeah.
I get messages all the time from people that just want to come out and be on the property. And unfortunately, with the virus and everything going on right now, we do have the enclosure closed to the public.
Right.
But, the property's open. And honestly, as long as people are 6 feet apart, I don't care. I think it's wonderful. They come out and they spend the day out there. You do what they want to do. They stop in, they look in the windows.
Right.
I just want them to be educated.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, whatever. And I don't mind answering the questions. A lot of people come with just information, incomplete information.
Right.
And and I try to leave my personal feelings out of it, but sometimes it's hard.
Yeah, I'm
Sometimes
sure
it's hard.
with all the work that you've done, and how can you not kind of be a little bit biased? Because, like you said, you kind of feel like you're a family member, and you also feel that you have this passion to protect it and whatnot.
Yep.
But speaking of questions, we do have one in the chat group, which I don't want to miss. It's a really great question by Ganyak Paranormal. Ronald Lourdes asks, question for Tracy: what's the biggest misconception about the Fox sisters and their story that research can clarify with absolute certainty? With absolute certainty.
Oh boy.
I know.
I, ooh, yeah.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is because I think there's a lot of different. Well, I think the biggest misconception is that they fake the whole thing.
Right.
Now, if you look at some of the newspapers in that time period, especially around the early 1900s when the bones were found, that is documented proof. It's in newspapers around the world. New York, they had a big thing. The Rochester Democrat had a big article about it, with the bones being found. And then, of course, you've got the tin pack. That's in Lilydale. That's in the museum. I don't. I don't know. That's about all I can really say because that's the clear fact that
Right.
peddler told them, I'm buried in the basement. They went in the basement, they dug down in the basement trying to find him. The basement filled with water. They
Right.
had to stop. They
Right.
tried several attempts for many months, didn't work. They
Right.
moved out. John Fox, this was a temporary home for him. He was up the road with his son building a home for his family. And his wife takes off with his daughters and goes to New York City on this world tour. And, the poor man's back here in Hydesville building a house. And when the house is done, he's sending letters to New York City saying, when are you guys coming home?
Right.
And they're like, we're not.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
life went on for him,
Yeah.
and he did build his home, and eventually Mrs. Fox came home and, would stay a little bit. And that's all documented too. That was the nice thing about the newspapers back then. You knew who was coming to visit, who, when, where, what, and how.
Right.
Uh,
And
so,
if I'm not mistaken too, I remember in conversation, if I remember correctly, in our conversation and other interviews that we've done with Miss Murphy tonight, in past conversation, I remember there being talks of affidavits about the peddler as well. When there was the investigation, when the peddler was discovered with the box.
there's a book called The Mysterious Wrappings of Hydesville, and it's the sworn affidavits of John Fox, Margaret Fox, and about 13 of the neighbors, including Lucretia Pulver, who was in the house when the peddler was murdered.
Right.
And like I said before, back then, there was no mistaking someone when they gave you their word, their sworn testimony. You knew they were on the up and up, because now I can say, oh yeah, Matt, the sky is yellow, take my word for it.
Yeah.
Back then, if I said, oh, take my word for it,
Mhm.
my word really meant something,
Right, right.
and it was your. So, for them to actually go on record and say, yeah, Margaret Fox's neighbor, I came in the night of March 31st, 1848. These are the things I saw. These are the things I heard. This is a
Right.
sworn testimony. You can't dispute that.
Right.
One of the other letters that I had the privilege of reading, and I actually was given a copy of it by the U of R, or Rochester University. They let me into the archives, and they have letters that Kate Fox wrote to. Oh gosh, I just drew a complete blank. One of her Quaker, gosh, isn't it terrible? One of her Quaker friends that was living in Rochester,
Oh, okay.
Amy Post. And Amy and Isaac Post were huge supporters of the Fox sisters, and kind of took them under their wing while they were living in Rochester. Because, they were still young. They were 11 and 14.
Right.
They're in Rochester. Right. People are putting them on stage, stripping them down naked, and making them call in spirits just so they could see if they were, cracking their joints.
That's terrible.
That's terrible. Yeah. So Amy and Kate were very good friends. Well, they have a letter that was written by Kate to Amy while she was back in Hydesville.
Yeah.
And she was staying with her brother, and she was talking about how they were sitting in the parlor of her brother's house, and they could hear the twinkling of music, and they were all holding hands, and she was describing a spiritual encounter at her brother's home. And I guess my theory is, if they were faking this, why did she go to all this trouble to write this down? Nobody was ever gonna. Right. Nobody wasn't. The only person who was going to read that letter was Amy Post. It wasn't like they, all of a sudden overnight they were famous, and she was sitting at her brother's thinking, oh gosh, in the future they're gonna want to know.
Yeah.
So, like things like that, where she documents in writing the events that are happening, things that she's seeing, and spirit communication. To me, that's just another piece of documented evidence.
Right, right. Well, that's what I'm trying to say. That like there's just too much documented evidence that points to the peddler, that points to their experiences in the cottage.
Right.
There's just so much that you can't deny that's there.
Well, and that's, I think that's the interesting thing too, is with the peddler, the peddler said, "This is my name. I'm 40 years old. I have 5 children. My wife has just passed." I mean, there was so much information given, and I think it's up to us to be the investigators and go find it. You can come to Hydesville, and you can talk to different people that will tell you about Mr. Drummond and how they knew him, and they were there when they saw the house, and how important it was back in the 1900s, even before they moved the house. The house was moved to Lilydale in 1916. um I mean, all those things. Why would Lilydale want a house from Hydesville if there wasn't some connection
Sure.
to what they believed in?
Yeah.
So, it's just there's just so much evidence, but at the end of the day, it's everybody's right to believe what they want, and I'm okay
Exactly.
with that.
Right.
Right.
You're gonna have your skeptics that believe the skeptic part of it. Like I said earlier in the show about the parapsychologist that was kind of like a skeptic, and he just came out saying, "Oh, they hoaxed it. It was a fraud." We could tell by the loud snaps and cracks and pops that they did on stage. It was so loud. You, you know, my thing is, you didn't have paranormal investigators like us investigate their cottage while they had paranormal experiences. You didn't
Right.
have that to kind of
Right.
back them up.
You had hardcore Methodists coming into the house
Right.
going, "I don't believe this. You people are crazy."
Right.
And for them to actually come forward in a small community like that took a lot of guts, because there were people in the town who shunned them.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just like, "Ooh, let's have a big party. You've got spirits." They looked at them like, "Whoa, what did you do?" Because it was very much black and white, good and bad, evil, God versus the devil. And they, for the Foxes to actually say, "Listen, this is happening. We can't deny it. It's happening. You came in, you heard it, you saw it. We're not crazy." The church closed the doors on them. They didn't want them in the church. People wouldn't talk to them because they thought, there's something wrong with you guys. You guys are all going to hell. This is bad. And, I think Mrs. Fox struggled with it for a long time as well. She thought this was a curse, and what did they do to bring this on them? And she would forbid the girls to even talk about it, or, if they heard noises, she didn't want them even trying to communicate, because she thought, "My gosh, this is wrong. This is evil. And maybe if we just ignore it, it'll go away." But they realized that, the more they ignored it, the worse it got.
Yeah.
And that was one of Kate's messages, was that, the spirits were coming through to her, and it wasn't just the peddler. It was many other spirits, and they just wanted a voice. They wanted to be heard. They wanted people to know, "We're still here. We still see you. We still love you. Don't forget us."
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty clear message, and I think that's like the human spirit, right? We want people to recognize us and value us for who we are, and and not be bullied or picked on, and
I
just
hate
kind of live a
bullies.
nice life. Yeah, right. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible, but I guess you take the good with the bad, and you try to balance it out.
Yeah. Guys, if there's an echo, I apologize. I'm trying to correct it. My wife just told me there's a kind of weird echo going on. We were good throughout. We were good throughout most of the show, but again, that's why my
Try the
wife,
system.
my wife is there. To let me know these things. So, again, I always point out, I always welcome feedback for the show. Let me know how the quality of the audio and video is for you guys. It's hard to listen live. That's why I try to have my wife let me know in the background, but it's kind of hard for me to interview my guests live and concentrate on that at the same time. Um, so, you know, email me strangeodditiespodcast@gmail.com. Private message me if you're connected with me on Facebook, or even on YouTube. If you're subscribed to our channel, you can message me there as well. Let me know how the quality of the show is. So if it was anything technical going on that I oversee, that I overlook, just let me know. Anyway, I'm having a great time here with Tracy. Tracy, I hope it's not echoing on your end, is it?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good.
It's all quiet in my office.
Yeah. So we rocking and rolling here about the Fox sisters. If you guys are joining us late, if anybody's got questions, feel free. Ron and Lourdes, I hope we answered your question. I think we did. I think we did a great job. I think they said that you answered it very well.
Oh, thank you
Yeah.
guys.
Um. Yeah. There's just like they're connected all over the world, not just here, not just Lilydale. They're connected in England, and there are so many churches and religions that have been influenced by them that people don't know about. Like me and Anthony Simonelli, when we were doing research for the documentary, learned that there were actual churches out here by us that actually were influenced by them, and that's how we ran into Janet Nohavich, up the journey
Yes.
within, and
Yep.
not just Jersey, but like actually here by us. There's even churches in New York City,
Yep.
if I'm not mistaken. They were in a big thing in New York City as well. And I don't hear myself echoing now, so I'm not sure what caused it, but I'm clear now, so good. All right.
I think that was when my husband and I went to visit his sister, and her husband in England. That was one of the things that I was most excited about, was going over there and actually, and in my mind, I'm like, oh, maybe I can find a spiritualist church. This will be kind of neat, and maybe we can go to a service. Um, they were everywhere. It was amazing. And the one place that we chose to go, they found out that I was the caretaker of the Fox property, and you would have thought I felt like the queen. I really did. They were amazing to us, and it was pouring out. I think, if I remember right, and Dave probably remembers better than I do, but I think one of the people actually gave us a ride home or back to his sister's place because it was pouring out. But they were everywhere, and that was the hardest part, was actually to pick a place to go because there were so many choices. And I think for a long time, Newark of all places should have a spiritualist church, and we're very lucky that Janet decided to pick Newark and start, the journey within North. I've been a few times. I've talked there, right before the whole shutdown and everything. And it's a great place. It's very welcoming. The service is very structured, which is great. Um, but when I first became a spiritualist, I was a part of Angel Heart Chapel with Reverend Lynn Denny, and it was an amazing place. I mean, it's very welcoming. You walk in and people are, "Hello, how are you?" It's like you've always been there. It's very welcoming. And I think a lot of times people have a misconception of what the church is like. Um, you know, and I remember Reverend Lynn saying, during one of the services, and I loved it because she's the greatest lady ever. And she would stand up there on the pulpit, and she would, welcome everyone in the morning, and, oh, there's a few new people here, and she would say, don't worry, people always think that spiritualists, we eat the firstborn, It's not the firstborn, it's the secondborn. So, you break the ice, you get people to come in, but honestly, a spiritualist church is no different than Presbyterian, Methodist, Catholic, Episcopalian, Baptist. We're no different. We
Right.
go in, we sing hymns, we pray, we have a message from the pastor or a guest. I think the only thing that is a little different is we do healings. We have healers that offer healings during the service.
Which I think is
And
really
at the
cool.
end of this, yeah, and then at the end of the service, we have mediums who are chosen and accredited through the NSAC that can give out messages. And it's not like they spend 6 hours doing messages. It's not a gallery reading. It's a positive message. It's a 5-minute message if you're lucky, and it's a random thing. But we're not any different. We
Yeah.
really aren't.
Yeah.
We
I,
put our shirt on the same way.
yeah. And I just want to thank Janet Nohovich just publicly on our show, on my show right now too, that we were invited that day that you guys had your annual Fox Sisters annual uh
Of
fest
our
fest
spiritualism.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
um
Celebration.
Yes, the celebration that you guys host every year, which was fabulous. It was such a great experience to able to witness that. um I recommend people who haven't done that, please go do it at least one time. It's a great experience to see all that take place. But to be invited into something like that you've never been a part of before, it's so like inspiring. And the things that each individual is involved with themselves, like they each have their own gift that they share when they come to the stage. Like Mr. Shield, he was sketching his um his ability when
Oh,
he was
spirit
seeing
grind.
spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was right. He was using some kind of sketching, and it was just like amazing
Yeah.
how he
It
was
takes
able to
shape.
do that. Yeah, and I was just
Yep.
so blown away.
Yep. It's amazing. And those are great gifts. And some people are really, really blessed and they have these wonderful gifts, and and it's something that you have to work on. You can't just walk into a room and say, "Hey, I'm a medium. Who wants a reading?" Doesn't always work that way. If it did, I'd be a millionaire. I'd be
Yeah,
playing the lotto every day.
one of my pet peeves is everybody thinks they have gifts these days.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, but hey, it is what it is till
yeah.
it isn't,
To
right?
to each their own is what I say.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Oh yeah.
All right. We're getting down to the end of the show, guys. We're actually over an hour. I can't believe how fast tonight went. But I've had a great time tonight with Tracy Murphy. She's the caretaker of the Fox Sisters ruins and the property that's left there in Hydesville, which is actually technically is now known as Newark Arcadia,
Yeah.
upstate New York. It's far from me. I'm not sure where you guys are, but it's worth the trip to go check it out. They've done a great job preserving the property there. You guys have done so much work with it, and I know there's so much more that you guys do have plans to do in the future, and and the state too. With their support as well. Um, so Brad in the chat has a question for Tracy. I don't want to overlook it. He asked, what do you like about Leah Fox's Underwoods book?
Well, which one? The missing link, maybe? Um, Lee Fox is a special woman. She is not my favorite sister. I think everybody kind of knows that when they come to my talks. I always felt that she was very matronly and very smothering to Maggie and Kate, more so to Kate because Kate had children, and that was Lee's thing. She liked to be the mom and the boss. Um, but I think each of the Fox sisters have written books.
Right.
They had books published about them. And, you know, I take them all with a grain of salt. I read them because there's always more information in there that maybe there's something in there that I overlooked or I haven't seen, or I've seen it for the first time with new eyes or whatever. But that's all I can really comment on. Is, as with anything, you just read it and you do your homework and you investigate a little bit and find more information. Don't
Yeah.
just read one.
Yeah. Brad has said, yeah, the missing link in modern spiritualism is, I think, is what he was referring with.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, what? Well, given to given to the pandemic, unfortunately, a lot of events have been postponed. When are you guys reopening? What can our listeners look out for as far as announcements with both the Fox Sisters property and Historic Palmyra? Anything coming up?
Well, with this lovely pandemic, a lot of the events around us have been canceled. And unfortunately, Bonnie had to make that executive decision to, we had to close down for a little bit. We are currently closed, but we are planning on having a big, comeback once we enter phase 4 and our governor says go back, we will be back. We're hoping to, it's going to be a learning curve. It's definitely going to be a little bit of a challenge. But we're coming up with some different ideas. And, we're going to try to keep doing our ghost hunts and our investigations. We have our multiple buildings. We have 5 museums. 2 of them we use for our ghost hunts. And we have one building has 3 floors, the other one has, the 2 floors. So we can split people up, and there's plenty of spirits to go around at Historic Palmyra. So I think, once we're a little looser with this pause, and we can go back, we should do pretty good. People love coming to Historic Palmyra for our ghost hunts. They love our ghost hunts, and we have a ton of history. So it's just a matter of how we're going to work this out, and when can we go back. And as far as the Fox property, right now the property is open. My little sign is up to please, practice social distancing. Whether you wear a mask or not, that's totally up to that person. If you can't do the 6 feet, then wear a mask. If you're sick, stay home.
Yeah.
But right now the enclosure is closed. But the windows are large enough that you can get a view of the whole property or the enclosure inside. If your listeners or your viewers aren't familiar with the enclosure, it is the original foundation. It dates back to 1812. And we have the area closest to the windows where the peddler's body was buried. Um, and I'll leave it up to you guys to come to the property and figure that one out. But uh, we have a website that, the Fox property has a Facebook page. Historic Palmyra has a web page. Or just, look me up on Facebook or send me a message. I'm happy to help.
Yeah. Tracy is very approachable. Don't be intimidated by all her great knowledge of the Fox Sisters. I want to, Tracy, personally thank you for being a guest on the Strange Oddities podcast. Do you have any personal shout outs before I say goodnight to everybody at the end of the show? Do you have any shout outs for anybody?
Oh, I just want to thank everybody that I sent the link to that popped in. Of course, my husband, because he's been supporting this, I don't know, what do you want to call it? This fascination, this, uh, I lost the word, my obsession with the Fox sisters and Historic Palmyra. So I always try to thank him, even though I only usually do it live.
Yeah.
Not in person or not in private, but he knows I love him. I'm here.
Yeah.
And I think my good friend Leslie is watching. Leslie's a big part of Historic Palmyra. She's awesome. So anybody else who's watching, thank you for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it. Knowledge is power.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys, tonight. Again, real quick for the Strange Oddities podcast, you can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on YouTube. That's where the live podcast broadcast. Click the little bell at the top right corner of the YouTube channel. Once you go to the link, it's real easy. Just select it, and you're subscribed. Um, any announcements and any upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. I put all the news and information on the Facebook page. We do have a website, strangeodditiespodcast.wordpress.com. And I have a weird echo going on. I'm trying to ignore it as best I can. Oh boy. Alright, guys. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. Everybody, be well, stay safe, and we're slowly reopening the country back up. Hopefully, phase 4 will begin real soon. Just hang in there, and everything's starting to slowly open back up, and hopefully we'll have some normal life again. And I just want everybody. We had a Memorial Day weekend just recently, and just real quick, because I'm a very big patriot. I'm a big passionate about America. I'm very patriotic. For those who know me, I just want to give a big shout out to the men and women who served our country to fight for our freedom. Never forget the fallen and the people who lost their lives in battle to give us our freedom. I just want to thank the men and women who have served, and especially those on the front line, the responders, the first responders, throughout this whole pandemic, all the police officers, and all the EMTs and the MTs and all those people. I just want to thank you for doing what you do, and God bless you guys. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you so much. So, all right, Tracy, you can stay on with me. I'm gonna end the show, and I'll say goodnight to her after that. But thank you for being on the Strange Oddities podcast. Hope you had a great time, and I know everybody else did. So, guys,
thank you, man.
Yeah, no problem. Have a great night. Be well. Stay safe. Good night, guys.